A Harpers Polling Survey of Colorado voters earlier this month showed Hillary Clinton with a 6-point lead over Donald Trump and Senator Michael Bennett with a 7-point lead over Darryl Glenn. Unfavorables for both Clinton and Trump remain high, but undecideds in both races only hover about 15 points in each poll. David, I realize this is July. The polls that we see right now are not about November, but is this going to be telling when it comes to momentum and fundraising and strategy this time of year?
Yes. Trump is doing terribly in Colorado for all the reasons Ed said. It's the Republicans in the state don't like him, and nor does many other people like him. Back in 1992, George H.W. Bush, who was a weak candidate, got only 36% of the vote in Colorado in a three-way race against Bill Clinton and Ross Perot. 36%, pretty lame for the major party nominee. Trump, in a race where you include Gary Johnson and Jill Stein, is at 28%. He's a miserable loser in Colorado and has, I think, no chance to carry it, although you can't rule out the possibility that Hillary Clinton could finally get caught in some other crime for which the American people might say enough is enough. But I think Gary Johnson throughout the Rocky Mountain states is going to be a very strong candidate, and even nationally, Gary Johnson, the former Republican governor of New Mexico, and like Mike Pence, actually not a narcissistic psychopath, which gives him a big edge on the character side. He's leading among millennials. And he's in second place among millennials. He's in second place among independents. And he's hovering just under that 15% threshold in the polls, which would get him into the debates. Mm-hmm. And given the widespread national dissatisfaction with both of the old party nominees, if he can get into the debates, I think there will be a lot of Americans who say, well, he's not perfect, but he's not as horrible. He's not horrible like these guys. He'll just be wrong sometimes, but he's not a menace to the Republic.
Menace to the Republic. I like that. Not the lesser of two evils. Penn, this specific poll was taken pretty close to one of Hillary's worst weeks on the campaign. The whole email thing with the FBI, and even though there were no charges recommended, it was not good optics. It was headline news everywhere else. And she's still ahead. Does her campaign consider this smooth sailing, at least in Colorado for now?
I don't think you consider it smooth sailing, but I think you clearly say that the worst is probably behind you. I mean, let's look at it. This whole email issue has been going on for, it feels like years. And she had wanted to go to Congress and deal with. Congress didn't want to deal with it. The report finally comes out, and I think it's fair to say the report was scathing. But at the end of the day, you had the director of the FBI who said, we're not filing criminal charges, and no responsible prosecutor would bring charges based on this set of facts. I think most Americans had factored that there was something unseemly about the email situation into their thinking and perception of Hillary Clinton, which is why her numbers are, in my opinion, as low as they are relative to Donald Trump, who takes delight in, inviting scorn every time he speaks. So I think the worst is probably behind her. The convention, the RNC convention, is going to be interesting because I think, as we talked about Trump before, that the party regulars, the diehards, and probably the folks who ought to be there who aren't, like George Will and Mitt Romney and the two Bushes, they're dying to see a script written and Trump give a speech, not remarks, a speech that is written and tailored to hit on points and talk about themes. The question is, does he have it in him, or is David correct? Is he a psychopathic narcissist who's just going to jump up there and say whatever he feels like because he's the nominee? And I think that's going to be a huge turning point for this election. If he gets off script or has no script and starts rambling for 45 minutes of prime time, I think he's doomed.
Ed, we have seen Darryl Glenn, the other side of this whole polling story here. He was unapologetic in the debates, saying, I'm not looking to compromise with the other side of the aisle. And even after the primary said, I'm not pivoting to the center. I am who I am. I'm going with it. Can that win in Colorado?
I'm not going to say it can't win. Colorado has elected conservative and liberal senators before. We're a state that, within a matter of 4 years, put both Gary Hart and Bill Armstrong in the U.S. Senate.
True.
So Coloradans are willing to take a chance on people who may be outside their ideological comfort zone. I think Glenn's bigger problem is that people just don't know him. And this is a guy who is going into this race with almost no money right now. I mean, there was, what was the turnout? 22% for the Republican primary this year. A lightly watched primary. The guy now has to meet the rest of the state, and the first thing people will see is El Paso County Republican, and that'll lose some people before they ever get a chance to meet him. Colorado also really likes its resumes. I mean, you know, we haven't thrown a governor out of office since the 50s. We consistently reelect our U.S. senators, except for 2014, and even then, we replaced a sitting U.S. senator with an up-and-coming U.S. House rep, so it's not like somebody who didn't have a lot of experience. 20 of our last 24 congressional new electees have come from a state house background. I don't know that people are going to look at Glenn's resume when stacked up against Bennett and be as impressed. And certainly there are people who will say, I like the guy who's closer to the public. He spent 13 years in the city council and the county commission, and that's good. But I think a lot of Coloradans might be looking for something bigger and heftier on there. So I don't think his conservatism will kill him if he is straightforward with his message, but he's got to do a lot of the more political things in terms of branding and fundraising in order to get that message across.
Patty, again, like I said, the July polls don't tell you about November, but if they continue to go that way, where we have both Trump and Glenn behind at least several points, more than a half dozen, is Colorado going to maintain its swing state aura?
I think we have a swing country right now. We're not going to have to worry about the one swing state. I mean, no one could have imagined sitting at this table a year ago that we would be about to hear Donald Trump at the Republican National Convention as the presidential nominee. Penn has a really good point, which is the speech that Trump gives, if indeed it can be called a speech, is going to be fascinating and could really affect the outcome. If he gets up and rambles the way he did at the Western Conservative Summit, where he went on and on, wasn't really geared to the audience. If he doesn't gear it to the audience he's speaking to this time, which is the Republican committee and the country, he's going to be in trouble. It won't hurt Darryl Glenn to be there. By all accounts, he's a good speaker. I'm not sure it's going to make that much difference either, because people are going to be numb at a certain point following what's going on in Cleveland.